Thank you. We will open up with the Nurse Practice Committee at 9:34 and establish a quorum and get that started. Our chair has not arrived. And so I will ask for a committee member to step up and fill that role.
I will, excuse me, I will step up and fill that role. My name is Dolores Trujillo. I'm the current president of the board and a member of the Nurse Practice Committee. I will establish roll call and a quorum. Dr. Mary Fagan?
Mary Fagan, I'm here.
Jovita Dominguez?
Is here.
Thank you. So the quorum has been established. Moving on to the next agenda item, we would like to open it up for public comment for items not on the agenda. Your moderator?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in the request for a comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Mary Adorno would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Hi, this is Mary Adorno. I'm calling on behalf of the California Association for Health Services at Home. I am their legislative specialist. I receive calls from NPs nearly every day. There's been a conflict that we're trying to get resolved. The Department of Public Health has posted an FAQ as a result of the CMS waivers not being extended by CDPH. They answered a question that NPs could still continue to sign orders for home health. However, prior to that FAQ, they had notified CASA during our quarterly licensure meeting that the Board of Registered Nursing has scope authority, and therefore they could not opine on the process of implementation of AB 890. And I've been monitoring the NP advisory, and I know that we need regulations for transition to practice, and we worked very closely with members of the NP advisory committee to establish a fact sheet that is currently online on your website, and we're very happy about that. The problem is I've been referring people to that fact sheet, which indicates at this time you must be working under standardized protocols as specified in the Business and Professions Code. However, the NPs are questioning me because of the FAQ that is posted on the Department of Public Health's website. We're hoping that you can get to the department, into their legal team. Braden Oporowski heads up the policy department. He used to work at CASA. If you could let them know what the current status is for NPs, that they still need to work under those protocols until we get transition to practice regulations, that would greatly help my workload. Thank you for the opportunity to present today, and I appreciate everything the board is doing.
I will reach out now. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Mary would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Hello, I just wanted to make sure, is it time for us to make a comment regarding AB 890?
No, this is for items that are not on the agenda. AB 890 is if it's related to OPES, report out that is on the agenda, and we have a specific agenda item for that.
And that will be in how long? I apologize for interrupting.
There is no accurate timeline for that. We do have the meeting minute agenda item. We also have a sunset bill report out, advisory committee updates. Then we'll go into a discussion for CNS and CRNA regs, an update to the Business Profession Code on CRNAs, a discussion of our APRNAC, and the final agenda item is for OPES. I would expect that to be an hour or so down the line at minimum.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. It is agenda item 7.8.
7.8.
If you would like to send me an email at loretta.melby@dca.ca.gov, I will send you an email letting you know that it is coming up, if that will help you plan your day better.
Thank you so much. Yes.
And that's regarding the Office of Professional Examination Services report at item 7.8.
Correct. Thank
So
you.
if it's okay.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Thank
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your comment. Committee Chair Trujillo, there are no other public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. Thank you. Okay, moving on to 7.2.1, we're going to review and vote on whether to approve previous meeting minutes, and this is for March 24th, 2022. I would like to make a motion to accept the Nursing Practice Committee meeting minutes from March 24th, 2022, and allow BRN staff to make non-substantive changes to correct name misspellings and or typos that may be discovered in the document. Do I have a second?
This is Mary Fagan. I'll second.
Okay, any questions from the board? Okay, we'll move to public comment. BRN moderator, please open for public comment.
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Committee Chair Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. Thank you. All right, we'll take it to a vote. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Dr. Mary Fagan.
Mary Fagan, yes.
Jovita Dominguez.
Dominguez, yes.
Okay, motion carries. We're moving on to the next item on the agenda.
This is Vicki Granowitz. I have a point of clarification.
Sure.
I thought I had been appointed to this committee. Am I wrong about that?
You are appointed to this committee.
I'm very sorry, Vicki.
Okay, so I abstain.
Thank you. I had printed the committee members and we need to update that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I have asked for IT to update that this morning.
And I am putting it on my list now. Thank you. Thank you, Vicki. All right, moving on to the next agenda item. This is the update on the board sunset bill, Assembly Bill 2684 from the ledge session this year of 2021-2022 as it relates to nursing practice. And we will hear now from Macaulay. Is Macaulay giving?
It's me.
Oh, okay. Thanks,
Thank
Lori.
So this is Loretta Melby, or Lori. I'm the board's executive officer. I will give a report out on this. This year, our sunset bill was introduced and signed into law. It's AB 2684. We did receive a 4-year sunset. And so we will continue with a board until January 1 of 2027, absent any introduction of new law. Some of the updates that came in on the sunset bill that are of interest to many around nursing practice is the combining of the furnishing license with the advanced practice RN application. Currently, we have 2 of our advanced practice that can prescribe based on a furnishing license, and that is our nurse midwives and our nurse practitioners. There is a fee that is associated with both of those applications, and the board is working to implement that the first of the year to have an option for a nurse practitioner and a nurse midwife who chooses to ask for a furnishing license, that they can do so on the initial application. This is an attempt to decrease the fees associated with that application process, as well as expediting that process so that it is faster and they can obtain it easier. So that was an ask by our board, and that was accepted. Additionally, right now, all of our fees are set at our statutory minimum. The board was not able to decrease any of the fees past the statutory minimum that was established in law, and therefore we did, as a board, ask for all of the fee bottoms to be removed, and so that was accepted as well. And so we will start looking at the fees of all of the items that we collect fees on, and see if there is a need to decrease them at any point now that we have that ability. And the first step was actually combining those applications and removing that furnishing license fee so that it can be in one. And so that will be a initial decrease that people will see come the first of the year, after the first of the year. Additionally, there were some cleanup sections in here that followed AB 890, which we'll be discussing later during this committee meeting. AB 890 is the bill that was passed a few years back that creates a pathway for nurse practitioners to advance from working under standardized procedures after graduation to an independent practitioner as a 103, and then further as a 104. So there was some code cleanup done as part of our bill that will help to kind of clarify some of the sections that still required the NP to operate under standardized procedures. Our 103 NP and our 104 NP, when they progress to those additional certifications, they will not be required to work under standardized procedures. So those needed to be cleaned up. Additionally, it did clarify a pathway for a furnishing license for our 103 and 104 NPs, knowing that that may not be permanent. There is some rumors out there that they maybe have some legislation introduced next year to request the furnishing license to be removed from California Advanced Practice RN so that they can prescribe based on their license versus based on a furnishing number. So they did make sure to make those amendments in one section so it would be an easy cleanup if that were to move forward in the future. There were a large update specific to education, but we will not cover that in this particular committee. That will be covered at an additional date where we will have to establish some uniform methods. Another area that does affect nurse practice committee is there was a codification where the Nurse Education Workforce Advisory Committee was put into statute. And so at that point, it is now a statutorily required advisory committee. So it is similar to our Nurse Practice Advisory Committee and our Nurse Midwife Advisory Committee. And all of our advisory committees do report out through nurse practice. So I wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of that. They did accept the charter as we had implemented and updated in this previous year, and the committee members as we has implemented and updated. They did add one committee member, and that is a Cal State University Office of Chancellor representative. And we are in contact with them and will be hoping to add both of the chancellor appointments, the one from the community colleges, the one from CSUs soon, And we are currently in the process of scheduling a final NEWAC committee for this year so that we meet the second requirement with that. Other than that, that was pretty much the gist of our sunset bill that covered nursing practice and affected our nurse practice committee. And if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them or have any discussion around them. Absent the education section, which I still have a lot of work to do to have that up and ready for January.
Thank you, Lori.
You're welcome.
Any questions or comments from the committee members or the board? All right. Thank you, Lori. BRN moderator, can we open it up for public comment?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired and will move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Christy DeLemos would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
I just want to make sure people can hear me first.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Gosh, thank you so much. I just want to say how much I appreciate that the board is looking at combining licensure. That is such a huge step forward for our advanced practice community. And I just wondered if you could comment. The first thing that you brought up was that there would be a combined application process for new folks that are coming through. And then I got the impression that there's also, for existing folks like me that have been around for 20 years, an opportunity for us to have combined licensure at a later date. Is that correct?
I'll clarify. The combined license, it will still show on the Breeze license lookup, the 2 separate licenses. You will receive a nurse practitioner or a nurse midwife and an additional furnishing. You will have 2 licenses. The application will be a single application with a single fee. And we will also add that as the renewal process as well. For those that choose. We do have nurse practitioners, we do have nurse midwives that choose to just be licensed solely as a nurse practitioner and nurse midwife without furnishing, and so that remains an option. If future legislation is introduced, which we have heard rumors that is the ask of CANP, as well as the California Midwife Association. So if that does go through and get signed in, that would be the next step, would be the removal of the requirement of a furnishing license. But we will await legislative update and potentially to see if that passes. As you know, BRN cannot do anything without law. And the law process is that it would have to go through a bill writer, be introduced as a bill, and get passed through the legislative session and then signed by the governor. And if that happens, we will be happy to implement whatever comes through in that new law.
Thank you so much for the explanation.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your comment. Committee Chair Woods, there are no other public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I'm sorry. Committee Chair Trujillo.
No problem. Okay, moving on to the next item, advisory committee updates. And we will start with the Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee, NPAC.
Thank you. We do have a nurse practitioner and a nurse midwife committee meeting scheduled for November 1st. Agendas are on our website and we will be holding them. So I just wanted to make sure that was out there and aware for people that are still kind of learning that process. So the nurse practice committee has not met since March 24th, I believe. We did have an update on that, and so there is not a lot of updates for you guys. You guys will be receiving the OPES report at the end of this meeting. Will be put forth to the Nurse Practice Advisory Committee coming up on November 1st for an ample discussion, as well as possible recommendations coming to our board. And you guys will receive those recommendations coming from NPAC at the upcoming November board meeting. So there will be some discussion around that. We are also currently in the AB 890 45-day comment period for the implementation of regulations that will go towards establishing the transition of practice, the 103 certification, and the 104 certification for our NPs. That is scheduled to close comment period on November 2nd. We will be presenting the comments received to date on November 1st so that the Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee will have a chance to give any feedback to the board so that we can get those comment responses to the board at the November 14th, 15th board meeting as well. We are under, of course, a time crunch to try to get these regulations passed. So if there are not any substantive changes that have to go out for a notice of a 15-day or a 45-day, we should be on target, barring any issues with OAL or DCA or agency going forward with that. If there are changes that do need to be done to this regulatory package, that would delay the implementation from the January start. And we will continue to move forward in an expedited manner as much as possible to get any updated language changed. We do have options, just so the board committee members are aware, that we could do a subsequent rulemaking package by introducing or updating regulations later if we choose to move forward as is. So that is the update for the Nurse Practice Advisory Committee. Again, they haven't met since March, but we have a huge purpose for them to meet on November 1st, and they will. We expect to have recommendations coming from them to the board at the November 14th, 15th meeting. Any questions?
I don't see any questions. Any comments? Okay. So we'll go through the advisory committee updates, and at the end of it, we will open for public comments.
Perfect. So the next one is the Nurse Education Workforce Committee, and that is commonly referred to as NUAC or NEWAC. And so we did have a meeting of the Nurse Education Advisory Committee this year on July 28th. It was the first in many years. There was a few years because of a pandemic that occurred that our Nursing Education Workforce Advisory Committee did not meet. As you guys are very well aware that those committee members are primarily nursing program directors, as well as union representatives and actively working nurses and advanced practice nurses. And so they had other focus. Go figure. I think we all were really overworked and just doing our best to get through that time frame. So I appreciate NEWAC's patience for us getting it scheduled and kind of moving forward. So we did hold the meeting. They did vote on a chair and a vice chair. The chair of the committee is Garrett Chan, that many of you guys are familiar with as participating in the APRNAC committee. He has resigned from the APRNAC committee, has effectively come to NEWAC, and he graciously accepted the chair position. And we are very excited to have somebody who has that experience as kind of leading that committee forward. As mentioned in my report out from from our Sunset Bill, NEWAC was codified and is put into statute. And so they are required to meet twice a year. And they are to alternate committees focus on workforce issues one meeting and education issues the next meeting. And we will be working by establishing subcommittees so that work can be done in between those two meetings and then reported out in a public forum when we do that. So that was one of their agenda items. They did vote on a calendar for the upcoming year as well. And then they provided some feedback on 1410.5. And if one of our original public comment persons for today is still on regarding the nurse anesthetist practice, I'll give a little bit of background on the 1410.5 that was discussed during NEWAC. 1410.5 is a new regulatory section that our board voted on, including into our California Code of Regulations, and that is to address primarily the public commenters request earlier today, and that is the requirement of all advanced practice RNs to be licensed as an RN first in California. Based on that requirement to be licensed as an RN first in California and then receiving a advanced practice certification for either nurse anesthetist, nurse midwife, nurse practitioner, or clinical nurse specialist, they have to be licensed as an RN. In order to be licensed as an RN, you have to meet all of our requirements that are currently set forth, including education to become an RN. That pre-licensure education in order to become an RN requires microbiology and anatomy and physiology to have a laboratory component. What was voted on by our board was to look at an exception for people that have been practicing in good standing, that have taken and passed a microbiology and anatomy and physiology course as part of their nurse licensure, that did not necessarily have a specific laboratory component. And so once that regulatory package is submitted to OAL, public comment is received, and the intention is to have this added to our regulations. Once that is added, and I'm putting that out in their universe, hoping that it does come to fruition, that we will have a pathway for those applicants to be able to come in state from out of state who did not have a specific laboratory component of their microbiology or anatomy and physiology courses and have been practicing in good standing as an RN outside of California. NEWAC made some changes and some recommendations on that, and they did move forward. And so it was a very successful NEWAC committee meeting. We're happy to have them back and up and running, and excited to see what the future brings for that committee now that it is established in statute. Any questions on the Nursing Education Workforce Advisory Committee? I'm not hearing any questions. Dolores, were there any questions or comments around Nursing Education Workforce Advisory Committee?
No, I don't see any questions or comments.
Okay, so the next update is that the Nurse Midwife Advisory Committee, is that correct? Okay, give me 1 second. Let me pull that up. The Nurse Midwife Advisory Committee was held on August 9th. There was a quorum and everybody was there. When that was up and going, I'm just trying to pull it up here. Sorry, my computer is slightly delayed. And I want to make sure that I'm able to pull that up and view that. So if you can give me just some patience here really quick for that to load. 1 second. Okay, it is loaded now. I apologize for that. I had to turn off some of my extra tabs on the computer to see if I can get my computer's bandwidth to open back up. Okay, on the Nurse Midwife Advisory Committee, they did talk about updates to the charter. They did look at meeting dates for that year. And then they talked about updating 1463. So 16 CCR 1463. Our current regulation in 1463 addresses the use of standardized procedures. And that is no longer a requirement after SB 1237 was signed into law. And so we will be working with our regulatory team to repeal that specific subdivision. And hopefully that will come together and work out really close for them so we can speed that process up, and that's removed. They did mention that there were some issues regarding their practice because of that. So the next one was an FAQ document. They did update the introduction to that. They took it straight from the bill introduction of SB 1237, sorry. And so it was appropriate to move forward and talk about that. We did a presentation on enhancements to licensing updates. And so that was received well, and we will have some more updates going through. One of those, of course, was the furnishing license that we kind of talked about earlier. And lastly, there was a robust discussion around admitting privileges for nurse midwives. Some hospitals are not allowing it to occur, and some hospitals are allowing it to occur. We did reach out to CDPH because that does fall within their purview and not the BRN's purview. I will be reporting that out as well as part of the executive officer's report out on what I heard back regarding that in the November 1st meeting. And so there is going to be a November 1st meeting for Nurse Midwife Advisory Committee as well. The agenda is on our website, so you can go ahead and view that if that's something that anybody's interested in attending. There are just a couple agenda items to be discussed on that one. And the main one is the development of subcommittees, very similar to what we talked about with NEWAC, where they can really do some work and get some focus going in between publicly noticed meetings, and then report out all that work in a public forum when we do the publicly noticed meeting. Because again, the Nurse Midwife Advisory Committee has now dropped from 4 meetings a year down to 2 meetings a year, as well as the Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee and the Nurse Education Workforce Advisory Committee. So that is all of the updates for the Nurse Education Workforce Advisory Committee. The Nurse Midwife Advisory Committee. And I'll open up to any questions or comments that the board has at this, that the committee has at this.
Thank you, Lori. Any questions or comments from the board?
From the committee.
From the committee.
We've both been copied today, Dolores.
Seeing that there's no questions or comments, we will move on to the last advisory committee update. And this is
the last advisory committee update is the Advanced Practice Registered Nursing Advisory Committee. They did have a meeting that in, and of course it's loading. There we go. September, and September 22nd was their final advisory committee for this year. And they did vote on the charter's term limits in office. What had happened when APRN was established and implemented, so it was established in 2017 and implemented in 2018, every person came on and everybody termed out at the same time. So similar to the report out from the EIC committee, where Shannon, our enforcement chief, discussed was kind of staggering in term limits. And that is what we did with the APRNAC. They now match the Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee, the Nurse Midwife Advisory Committee, and the NEWAC as well. So will not have that committee kind of every member end at the same time. So that has been fixed and updated. There was a member that did decide to no longer continue during that discussion, and our board has been updated with that, our board website. Additionally, there are meeting dates that were established for the next year. They did talk about CNS, FAQs, updating the board's website, and really looking at the need for the CNS issues that are coming up. And additionally, the next discussion was on CRNAs and looking at FAQs under that purview as well, and really working to get that up and going. And so they are on a subsequent agenda item for today. That is our only advisory committee that is not statutorily required. And so that is important for the practice members to have an awareness of that, because each year we have to bring APRNAC, because it is not statutorily required, in front of our board and committee to decide whether or not they continue, and to decide whether or not their focus remains the same. As you guys are aware, APRNAC was focused previously on NP, nurse midwife, nurse anesthetist, and CNS practice. And with the establishment of the Nurse Midwife Advisory Committee and the Nurse Practice Advisory Committee, they were redirected last year for CNS and CRNA. So that's why you will see both of those agenda items that we discussed in the August meeting were specific to CRNA and CNS practice. And if there are any questions at this particular moment on this item, I will take them now. And if there are no questions, we can open up to public comment, as there is no motion that needs to be made. And we can move on to the next agenda item. So please let me know how you wish to proceed.
Any questions or comments from the committee members? All right, BRN moderator, can we open it up for public comment?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Dr. Giron would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Hi, Sarah Drone, nurse anesthetist again. I'd like to thank Loretta Melby for that clarification on the regulatory status of older practitioners having some sort of exception made for their coursework. My question is how long this regulatory change would take to actually come to fruition and have some bearing on the access to patient care in California. Thank you.
Typically, a regulatory package takes a year or two. There is always an option that if somebody is interested in putting it into a bill, that can be put in through a legislative update, which could be implemented with an urgency clause or for January rollout. So depending on if it's passed. So we're at minimum a year, but could be up to about 2 years. But the process has started, so we're hoping that it goes smoothly and will wrap up sooner than later.
Thank you for your comment. Committee Chair Trujillo, there are no other public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. Thank you. All right, moving on to the next agenda item, 7.5, discussion and possible action regarding development of regulations for clinical nurse specialists, CNS, and certified registered nurse anesthetist, CRNA. Is this you, Lori?
It is me. It's me all day, every day on practice right now. so thank you for bearing with me. As I've noticed, I've said a lot of ums today. We should probably start counting them. It's ridiculous. Okay. For the agenda item 7.5, looking at developing regulations for clinical nurse specialists and nurse anesthetist, we did notice throughout this last year, just kind of working with Sunset, comments received by stakeholders, difficulty with licensure processes, that our business profession code, Article 7 of that addresses nurse anesthetist, there's been no regulations built from that. This section was added in 1983. And the only updates that occurred later in 2016 and 2018 were really around application and fee. And those were minimal and not particularly clear. In 2018, there was a minor adjustment that kind of talked about supervision, but there's been no additional guidance, no regulatory updates at all. And as you can tell by looking at our regulations within the Nurse Practice Act, there is not even a section that addresses nurse anesthetist. Additionally, that's very similar to that for clinical nurse specialist. Clinical nurse specialist, what that section was added into Article 9 of our Business Professions Code in 1997. And again, in 2016, the only update that occurred to that section was a fee adjustment, an application process. And so there are no regulations that you can see in our California Code of Regulation and Nurse Practice Act as well regarding clinical nurse specialists. That becomes problematic with academia being involved with that. It becomes problematic with the various clinical nurse specialty focuses and licensing with that. And so our staff, stakeholders, myself, are asking the committee to consider allowing our board staff to move forward with implementing regulations for both CNS and CRNAs and start that process as it has been identified as a great need at this particular moment. Any questions or comments around this particular agenda item?
Any questions or comments from the committee members? Okay, I would like to make a motion, and that motion is to approve the development of regulations for CNSs and CRNAs and direct staff to take all steps necessary to begin the rulemaking process. Do I have a second?
I'll second. This is
Vicky. Thank you, Vicky. Okay, BRN moderator, we can open up for public comment, please.
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired and will move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, I would like to make a comment. Christy Gill would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. I'm sorry, Chris Gill.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Sorry. I want to thank you for making this meeting available to the public and other stakeholders. It's been really interesting to listen to the proceedings and very organized. So I actually just wanted to offer any support that the National Board of Certification and Recertification of Nurse Anesthetists could provide to either the executive director or any staff or board members in terms of anything relating to CRNA practice or regulation. I also am going to offer the services of my counterpart at the American Association of Nurse Anesthetists, Brett Morgan, who's the Senior Director of Practice. So if there's anything that we can provide to you all in terms of information to make the best decisions for the state of California and your citizens, I'd be happy to work in any way with you all. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Roxanne Gould would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Roxanne Gould with Roxanne Gould Government Relations. Today I'm representing the California Association of Clinical Nurse Specialists. As many, if not all of you know, CACNS is the professional association representing over 3,000 California clinical nurse specialists, and they serve as the unifying voice and networking forum for CNSs, providing expert guidance, and they advance the role of the CNS statewide. CACNS has drafted regulations that they were created by the organization with experts in direct care, education, and the legal aspects of practice. CACNS would like to partner with the BRN in adopting these regulations as the BRN progresses through the regulation promulgation process. Once the regulations are in final draft form, likely by mid-November, I suspect, CACNS is asking that the BRN APRN Advisory Committee review them as they are the experts in advanced practice registered nursing. So thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in the process and in such an informative meeting.
Thank you for your comment. Melanie Rowe would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
This is Melanie Rowe. I am a nurse anesthetist here in California, and I'm the practice director for the California Association of Nurse Anesthetists. As you know, CRNAs have been safely administering anesthesia to Californians since the 1920s, and the California Association of Nurse Anesthetists looks forward to working with the BRN to reflect our current practice. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Michelle Ferrer Riengen would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Michelle Ringen. I'm the dean at Point Loma Nazarene University, and I'm happy to hear that the BRN is looking at some more specific regulations when it comes to CNS education and licensure. I'm even more happy to hear that the California CNS has offered their consultation in this process. I'm asking the board to consider current applicants and the current academic process that's in place that follows the NACNS competencies, and that our students, our graduates, be able to be licensed. I do have a graduate who's been trying to get licensed since April, and we seem to be getting mixed messages because of the BRN's, because of the board's plan to go ahead and look at these regulations. However, in the meantime, I would really request that our students, our graduates, not be placed on hold while this process is starting up.
Thank you for your comment. Jeannie Meyer would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
I am a clinical nurse specialist for palliative care at UCLA Health and the current president of the California Association of CNSs. I really wanted to reinforce Roxanne Gould's comment. CACNS has already drafted some regulations in draft form. We stand ready to work with the board as subject matter experts in CNS practice, covering a diverse group of clinical nurse specialists serving multiple populations. I also really want to state that our colleague who is in academia, we would very much welcome the opportunity to work with academic organizations to try to maintain CNS programs that are desperately needed. We hear daily about multiple positions that are open for CNSs around the state of California, and we have proven our value. Thank you so much to Loretta and to the board for bringing this issue forward.
Thank you for your comment. Committee Chair Trujillo, there are no other public requests for comment. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, I would. Thank you. So we have a motion on the floor with a second. We will do the vote. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Vice President Mary Fagan, Dr. Mary Fagan.
Mary Fagan, yes.
And Jovita Dominguez.
Jovita Dominguez, yes.
And Vicky Granowitz.
Vicky Granowitz votes yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. Moving on to the next agenda item. This is discussion and possible action regarding updates to Business and Professions Code Section 2830.6 to amend the name of the National Certifying Body for CRNAs.
Thank you. So just this one is actually should be a very quick agenda item. It was brought to our attention in the APRN AC committee, APRN committee, advisory committee, and as well in some stakeholders meetings that we participate in, specifically Advanced Practice Coalition, that the business profession code that we currently have that talks about the national certifying body and renewal is out of date. Again, remembering the prior agenda item where it shows that the articles that address CNS and CRNA care have not been updated effectively. And so those those agency names are incorrect, and we need to update that in our business professions code. There are a couple ways that we can go about that. We were included in a email ask, as with many of the boards and bureaus, from the Senate BPED committee on any cleanup sections for this upcoming legislative session, so we could pursue it through that aspect. We could also pursue it through any statutory regulatory cleanup that's done through Department of Consumer Affairs. And if there is a bill that is requested by the board for any updates as we move forward and enter into this upcoming season session, that we could include it there. So the ask is for the committee and then ultimately the board support board staff and myself on moving forward to seek that correction of BPC section 2830.6 to update the national board and include the language similar to the nurse midwife language that's in statute, where it says, or its successor national professional organization as approved by the board, with the addition of that language that would allow for us to bring this in front of the board if there's an additional change in the future, and the board could vote to approve a new successor and not have to go through a specific legislative process to get that updated within our BPC. So there are any questions on this? I would take them now. If not, we'll open it up for a motion.
I'll move the staff recommended motion.
Okay, so you have the motion is on the webs on our
Want me to read
PowerPoint
it?
right here, Vicki. If you can read that as your motion, and then we'll get a second for it.
Okay, motion to approve on updating Business and Professional Code Section 2830.6 to amend the name of the National Certifying Body for CRNAS, delegate authority to the executive officer to work with legislative staff to amend statute, including making any technical or non-substantive changes required.
Thank you, Vicki. I second that.
So we'll go out to public comment. Board moderator.
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Melanie Rowe would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Hello again. Thank you. This is Melanie Rowe, CRNA and practice director for the California Association of Nurse Anesthetists. Recognizing the work that's needed for these regulatory changes, we respectfully ask and agree with the recommendation that was suggested about the successor National Professional Organization, and the CRNAs on the Advanced Practice Registered Nurse Advisory Council committee had also recommended similar wording, and so appreciate the changes. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Committee Chair Trujillo, there are no other public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second. We'll take it to a vote. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Dr. Mary Fagan?
Mary Fagan, yes.
Jovita Dominguez?
Yes.
And Vicki Granowitz?
Granowitz votes yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. We'll move on to the next agenda item. Discussion and possible action regarding the annual review of the role and continuation of the APR NAC.
Thank you. So the Advanced Practice Registered Nurse Advisory Committee, as you can see in the agenda item summary, it was established in 2017 and formed in 2018. The request came from the Senate Committee on Business Professions and Economic Development and the Assembly Business Professions Committee. The goal was to look at the current statutory requirements that we talked about previous in the meeting, and look and develop regulations, see what's lacking in them, see what kind of direction to seek legislation, promulgate regulations, and develop advisories to ensure APRNs have sufficient guidance in all practice. This was a discussion regarding, came out from the Sunset Review process during that year, and this was one of the recommendations that this moved. So APRN was established in 2017. It was formed in 2018. Last year, with the addition of the Nurse Midwife Advisory Committee and the Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee, the board redirected them because there was extensive overlap in the requirements after passing AB 890 and SB 1237. So the new focus after last year's was CRNA and CNS only. And the makeup of the committee was realigned as well. Previously, there were 4 NPs, 2 nurse practitioners, 2 nurse midwives, 2 nurse anesthetists, and 2 clinical nurse specialists. That was decreased to 2 representatives from each of the advanced practice roles. So 2 NPs, 2 nurse midwives, 2 nurse anesthetists, and 2 clinical nurse specialists. And that did change the direction of that committee. They did meet twice last year, and Mitchell Erickson, the chair of the committee, provided an outline of the stuff that they focused on in the committee this last year. There is a board strategic plan that ensures that all stakeholder voices are heard. Currently, CRNA and CNSs do not have their own advisory committee. We do have our own advisory committee for nurse practitioners, the own advisory committee for nurse midwives, but the CNS and CRNAs, who have a lot of ample work just ordered by this committee earlier to begin, do not have their own advisory committees. Additionally, they only have 2 representatives from each one of the advanced practice roles, so 2 CNSs and 2 CRNAs. When you look at the makeup of the Nurse Midwife Advisory Committee and the Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee, they have 5 members. They have 4 NPs, 1 public member, and 2 medical doctors or surgeons, and identical makeup for the Nurse Midwife Advisory Committee. There is a lot of work that needs to be done, and so the request is for this committee to look at whether or not APRN should continue another year and have that focus going forward to work on both the CNS regulations as well as the CRN regulations with the representatives that they currently have. We do have some vacancies on the current committee, so if it is continued, we will search to seek to get those positions filled. We are vacant, I believe, a CNS member that would focus. Right now, there's 1 CNS representative, and so that will need to be filled in order to have a second person that could work on the CNS regs. Additionally, there is always the concern that has been raised last year when this was discussed, and that's looking at the joint APRN. So issues that are similar that affect all APRN, CNS, CRNAs, CNMs, and NPs all together. And I wanted to make sure that you guys are aware, as being on this practice committee, and I'm sure that you guys are, but more for public to hear, is that the Nurse Practice Committee, if you look on our website, it says that the Nurse Practice Committee advises the board on matters related to nursing practice, including common nursing practice and advanced practice issues related to all 4 of the APRNs. That is nurse midwife, nurse anesthetist, clinical nurse specialist, and nurse practitioner practice. The Nurse Practice Committee also reviews all of the responses and proposed regulation changes that come. So the concern that without the advanced practice nursing and registered nursing advisory committee, that would not be taken into consideration. I wanted to assure the board that this is the committee that would be taken into consideration at. So as you saw earlier in the agenda, there was a report out from all of the committees to this board so that the board committee is aware of what's going on in each one of the advisory committees. And if there are issues to be addressed that affect all or even individually, this is where it would be handled within a board committee that then would then go to the board for ratification if that was the motion. So I'm open to discussion, conversations around this. I know that we will getting public comment that's already been ramping up, and it happened again at the APRN committee as well, because we have been very honest with our stakeholders about this consideration. And there are people that are really in support of continuing the APRN-AC, but there are also additional stakeholders that are in support of creating these new advisory committees so that they can have a focus on the regulatory process ahead. Remembering that Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee was formed to develop regulations to the implementation of AB 890. And it was a very extensive undertaking, and that is with some current regulations already in place. This is no regulations in place. We would be creating them from scratch, yes, with input from the committees and organizations that have offered their assistance in the public comment arena. but it does still have to go through the regulatory process. It does still have to be vetted, and it does still require stakeholder input. And so it is not a direct copy and paste. And then to address the commenter on the previous agenda item, we will not have language at a November board meeting at all for regulations. That will not happen. It's impossible to happen the way that is met. And so we would start the regulatory process as you guys voted in this committee. That is a recommendation that goes to the board. The board then meets on November 14th and 15th, and the board would have to, at that point, ratify that decision and have that ask go to staff. And so we would start this process in the new year of addressing regulations, getting that stuff going and getting some language out there. And so just to provide that clarification, this is not going to be an easy process that will be done by the end of this year. It is a beginning of the process, and that cannot move forward until we get the board vote in November. And I'm open to questions.
So Lori, is there opportunity for the CNSs, the 2 CNSs and the 2 CRNAs to move into these new advisory committees?
That would be optimal if we did, as if the committee and the board ultimately decides to sunset APRNAC. I would hate to see that happen in a silo. The recommendation that I would ask is for the creation of these 2 new subcommittees so that they can focus on that. And I think it would behoove us to consider moving over the 2 current nurse anesthetist members to that nurse anesthetist advisory committee. They have experience, they are a wealth of information, and they're able to jump right in and get moving on this. And then they would potentially become chair and vice chair, I would think, or at least have a great influence in mentoring and onboarding any new nurse anesthetist that would join that committee so that they can really work together with a larger voice where they can get 4 or more members depending on what the board establishes. Additionally, that would be the same with CNSs. And so currently, like I did mention, though, the CNS's representation in the current advisory committee is vacant. And so right now in the advisory committee, we do have 1 clinical nurse specialist, and that is Alyssa Brown. The other position is vacant. So it would be a request that if Alyssa does choose to continue and move to a new committee, if that is established, to have her move over so that there is no time lost. And then we would add the vacant positions. It would not just be the 1 CNS, it would be the multiple CNSs that the board would decide to move on if that is something that the committee recommends and the board accepts going forward. So good question. Thank you, Dolores. I appreciate that.
Any questions from the committee members or comments?
Can you just tell me a little bit about how the public process will evolve so that everybody does get to be heard as you form possibly the 2 new committees?
So, and I know, thank you, Vicki, you are new to this. We do have a nurse practitioner advisory committee and a nurse midwife advisory committee right now. And they were held 4 times a year for implementation of those large bills, SB 1237 and AB 890. And now that those are pretty much coming up to the final stages, they've been dropped down to 2 times a year. With the formation of the CNS and a CRNA committee, if that's what is decided here, we would ask for an increase in the first couple of years so that they can work through the regulatory process so that we can go out with having potentially 4 meetings or more. We would have establishment of subcommittees. In any of the publicly noticed meetings, there is always an option for public comment for items not on the agenda, as well as public comments toward every agenda item that we do. Additionally, it is routine practice within the last few years with the BRN that when there are large regulatory packages going through, with the example of AB 890, that we hold interested parties meetings. And so with those interested party meetings, we get a lot of really, really great feedback on what they see as a need and a direction for that. And it looks like it's already starting. And I love that the CNS group has already mentioned that they have regulations drafted, and that would be fantastic to put that out to a stakeholders meeting, receive comments on that, and then move forward through the advisory committee. Every advisory committee, once held, is reported out at a subsequent nurse practice committee, this one here. And because it is on the agenda again and part of this committee, there are more public comment opportunities for items not on the agenda, as well as the agendized report out. And so there would be ample public comment there. That is outside of the regular rulemaking process. When we get into the rulemaking process with implementation of regulation, there are statutory requirements come into play at that point. And so as the regulation language gets developed, it does have to go through practice committee. Again, this committee, and you guys would have a discussion on regulatory language, make recommendations to the board, and the board would then accept or modify, make changes, deny any of the regulatory language. So there are 2 additional stakeholder times for public comment there. And then after that language is put through and our staff works on it, then we submit it to the Office of Administrative Law. On submission to the Office of Administrative Law, there goes out to be another 45-day public comment period. In that 45-day comment period, we receive emails, letters from USPS, people reaching out to provide feedback to those regulations, and could even request a public hearing at that point. If there is a public hearing requested, then we would schedule a public hearing, hold that public hearing, and receive comments from all stakeholders during that public hearing. Any comments received during the 45-day period, we are required to respond to each and every single one of them. Once we respond to each and every single one of those, we would bring those back through the board, and the board would look to see whether they accept those comments, have any amendments to those comments, or if there are suggestions from those stakeholders received through those comments to change regulatory language or update, we would then have the board vote to change. If they are related changes, it would go back out to a 15-day public comment period, and if there are substantive changes that are unrelated to the current language that was there, it would go back out to a 45-day public comment period. Any of those comment periods, if any comments are received during those additional comment periods, we repeat again. We respond to comments, every single one that comes in, and every single one of those comments would go back in front of the board until language is decided on. Once language is decided on and there is no more changes, there is no more comment periods, and then we wait for OAL to complete their review. We complete a final statement of reasons where we turn everything in from all of the stakeholder meetings, all of the comment periods, all of the advisory committees, all of the board committees, and the board meeting minutes. And that goes to OAL for review and hopefully acceptance.
I come from the land use world of environmental impact reports, which people complain about all the time. What you're doing is more extensive than any process I've participated in the last 30 years for an environmental impact review. It's extraordinary. So there'll be ample opportunity for input from the public. Thank you.
Yeah.
More than I could have imagined.
It's a lot. It's a lot. That's why in some of the public comments here, we've heard, how long does a regulation take? And we say 1 to 2 years because there are statutory requirements for comments and comment periods. And it is a lot of work to implement and put into practice. And so it is a lot, but it's really a benefit to have stakeholder input, to really hear what they're going on. They're the experts, they're the ones affected by this. And we are here to take that input in and provide that service. Thank you.
Yeah, I also wanted to appreciate, because I read with interest the letter that was in the packet from the individual who chairs the APRNAC. And I think that you really responded to a lot of her comments in your comments today. So thank you. I was going to ask those questions, but you sort of dealt with that already. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments from the committee members? Seeing that there's no other questions or comments from the committee, I would like to make a motion to sunset the APRNAC and develop 2 new advisory committees for CNSs and CRNAs. I have a second.
This is Mary. I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Mary.
This is a recommendation for the board to go that route.
Yes. Okay, BRN moderator, can we open it up for public comment?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Cheryl Goldfarb Greenwood would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
My name is Cheryl Goldfarb Greenwood. I'm a clinical nurse specialist and a board member for the California Association of Clinical Nurse Specialists. California Association of Clinical Nurse Specialists organized and submitted a joint letter in June of 2021 to the Board of Registered Nursing from all 4 APRN organizations in California advocating for the continuation of the APRN Advisory Committee. We continue to advocate for the continuation of the APRN Advisory Committee. And this committee is a collaborative model that ensures a unified voice across the 4 APRN roles and addresses issues of common interest to all 4 APRN groups. And I think if the BRN has a directive to create separate advisory committees for the CNSs and for the CRNAs, I would hope that could be done in conjunction with continuing maintaining the APRN Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Elizabeth Bangbos would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Everyone, this is Liz Bambouche, current president of California Association of Nurse Anesthetists, well, as of this weekend, actually. I wanted to express our interest in continuing to work with our colleagues in the other 3 APRN groups as a part of the APRN-AC. While each advanced practice group is unique, we do share the same interest and goal to address the needs of our patients in every setting. The ability to offer a place or a committee where all of our specialties can come together and share information, I think is instrumental in advancing care and increasing access statewide. While I understand the burden of additional time commitment to this committee, as well as having separate NP and midwife advisory committees, the nurse anesthesia community would collectively like to agree with the prior comments and also support the continuation of the APRN Advisory Committee as a means to ensure that our profession moves forward in unity as we continue to serve communities that are desperately in need of high quality care by advanced practice providers. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Christy DeLemos would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Thank you so much. I would echo the last speaker. I agree completely that there's huge opportunities for cross-pollination between the groups, and maintaining the APRN-AC allows us to really look at meeting the needs in total for California as a group. And I would love to see the board consider continuing the APRN-AC and adding the additional committees needed to make sure there's representation from all groups. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Alyssa Brown would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Melissa Brown. I am the remaining CNS on the APRN Advisory Committee. I also speak in support of maintaining this committee as a whole. I think that we were formed with the intent to support the BRN in its role protecting the public. As my colleagues have said, there has been votes to keep this over the past few years based on the committee itself, public comments, and the letters that have been written by all 4 groups. In addition, the consensus model, the APRN consensus model, is a national document and joined by most of the organizations. And it recommends that boards of registered nursing in each state have at least one APRN, have an APRN advisory committee that includes representatives of all 4 APRN roles. And that's for the purpose of addressing issues that are common to our practice and to protect the public. This is an inclusive, diverse group of APRNs. I would hate to lose that diversity. I see no problem with keeping this group. As one of my colleagues suggested, even if the 4 groups were to be made separate, that we keep the APRN Advisory Committee to meet at least twice a year, to bring everyone together so that we are together on how we can protect the public, maintain safe standards, safe care for our patients. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Jeannie Meyer would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I want to strongly reinforce the words of my colleagues, and both CRNA, CNS, and I believe in fact, I know our nurse practitioner and nurse midwife colleagues feel strongly as well that this committee has been of benefit, as manifested by the letter that Cheryl and Alyssa mentioned. As president-elect and CACNS president, I've seen the work of this committee. I've seen the collaboration. I've seen the support for each other that has come out of it. I feel that it has demonstrated benefit. Echoing what Cheryl said, I also would like to see not only this committee continue, but the development of CRNA and CNS committees as well, because we do have rich work to be done, both individually and as a collaborative. Thank you for the opportunity to collaborate, and thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you for your comment. Committee Chair Trujillo, there are no other public requests for comment. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. So before we take a vote, I have a question for Lori. I'm just curious, would continuation of the APRN-AC committee overlap the work that could be done with the separate committees? In other words, if you have the separate committees, they're all for representing the public. With the APRN-AC committee, would that just overlap the 2 committees?
It does currently have an overlap with the midwife and nurse practitioner committees, which is why those specific focuses were pulled out completely, as to not have any Bagley-Keene violations, There was a committee member that was part of APRN AC that then moved over to the Nurse Midwife Advisory Committee. And then again, as we talked about earlier, where a member left APRN AC so that he could chair the NEWAC committee. And that's to really kind of streamline and ensure that there's no Bagley-Keene violations. What is discussed in one meeting by a committee member, that committee member cannot participate in another meeting to talk about specific board business. And Reza always explains that much better than I can. And so because in statute with NMAC and NPAC, it was clearly said that all matters around nurse practitioner practice has to go through the NPAC committee. All matters that have to do with nurse midwifery practice has to go through the nurse midwifery committee. And so having it also discussed in an APRN advisory committee would muddy that waters and cause for delays and not a clear guide for the public as to where to go. And so would they be like, is it discussed in APRN AC? Is it discussed in nurse practitioner? Is it whatever? And so that is why that decision was made last year. And so last year, the board made the decision to keep APRN for an additional year, build nurse practice committee up, which is what we're currently participating in right now, and really focus on the CRNA and CNS practice within APRN AC as to not have any Bagley-Keene issues. And that occurred. If we were to, if the board were to decide to keep APRN AC and create CNS and CRNAs, the benefit, Dolores, that we had talked about before we had that question is, can those members go to CNS committee or go to CRNA? Yes, they could, but then they wouldn't be on the APRN committee. Or if they stayed on the APRN committee, we would have to formulate a brand new committee within the CNS and CRNAs, get all new members in there, put out everybody, and we wouldn't have that knowledge transfer or leadership that can come from having the members that are on the current APRN AC to go to those CNS and CRNA advisory committees if established. They cannot dually serve. So they would be either on APRN AC or on a CNS group or a CRNA group, but they cannot serve both. That again would be a violation, possible violation of Bagley-Keene. So that there is a consideration as well. On the APRN consensus model, because I know that that's kind of probably what's triggering this, is that national recommendation. And we're above and beyond that. If we are to form the CNS and the CRNA committees, we actually have that representation that they're asking for. It was at minimum have an APRN AC so that we can get feedback from all four groups. So that we will have through these two statutorily required group and then the two that the board would form. Also knowing that this is not a if you were to choose to do a CNS or a CRNA subcommittee, advisory committee, and the board voted on that this year, if in a year that didn't work, we could always put the APRN committee back in. You know, if there are options, you know, because they're not in statute, the board has the options to do these things, to get things moving on if it was discovered that it was not effective. And that's really essentially what has happened with the APRN committee. Is with the APRN AC committee, the ask was to create the regulations and look at the statutes to see, you know, what is needed. And here we are, you know, 4 years after formation, and we have not looked at the regulations for CNSs or CRNAs. That has not occurred. And so this is where the board looks at to say, is this still the effective mode? What was a service in the past may not be a service presently. And those are all things that the board has to consider. Is this still serving the board? Is it still serving the protection of the public? Is this still the proper avenue for stakeholder input? Or is there something else out there that could be better? With the nurse practice committee, what you see right now with this participation, which is fantastic. And because each one of those individual committee members that are coming in and speaking in a comment here, there's not a violation of Bagley-Keene because they're not meeting outside publicly noticed meetings, et cetera, and we're getting feedback from all 4 of the groups. We're getting CNS feedback, CRNA feedbacks, nurse practitioner feedback, and nurse midwife feedback. And that is at a board level committee, which is fantastic. That's what the nurse practice committee is all about. So we are, even if the board or committee and board decide to sunset APRNAC, we have that answered right here through the practice committee, and having individual advisory committees that could come together and talk about all things interrelated in this forum is answering the APRN consensus model recommendation. And we're actually would be doing above and beyond what that recommendation is. The other thing that I do, just because I am the board DO and I have to look at staff time, having 2 additional advisory committees formed and keeping that advisory committee that would cause for an increased impact on our board staff for scheduling, getting quorum, getting materials ready, doing all that kind of stuff. Although we would take that on, it is my job to make sure that you guys understand that it is an impact. And it would have an impact on our budget as well, because these people do get per diems and et cetera, and they're required to maintain certain items within our board as well, as far as training and tracking and stuff. So it is an extensive workload, but is not something that the board could not do if the board voted to continue APRNAC and create CNS and CRNAs. But know that because, again, these are not statutorily required, the board has the ability to make amendments in future years. You know, we've had this one going in practice now for 4 years. That might be something that we look at with the creation of CNS and CRNA, if that's something that you wanted to do, and give it a couple-year run to see how that works. And if it doesn't work, we can always go back to an APRNAC or, whatever the board decides that serves better at that point, because it is about making changes and progressing and looking at streamlining processes and really serving like we need to do today.
Thank you, Lori. It would seem that creating the 2 committees and keeping the APRNAC, if those members were to move over, we would create, it would be more time to try to build up the APRNAC committee again.
So I'll try to provide a little clarification on that. Sorry, Dolores. The APRN committee right now is established. There are 10 positions, and there are currently 3 vacancies. Having the APRNAC committee continue would just mean that we fill those 3 vacancies. The clinical nurse specialist would stay on APRNAC. The nurse anesthetist, the 2 representatives for that group, would stay on APRNAC. That is the committees that they are part of, and that is typically where they would continue if they chose to keep their tenure there. The nurse anesthetist, one of them is a chair. The other one is just a member that's participatory, as well as the clinical nurse specialist. And then we have 1 vacancy. Those members would stay as part of the Advanced Practice Registered Nursing Advisory Committee. They would not automatically go over to a CNS or a CRNA committee if APRN stays. Okay. So if APRN is sunset, then I would ask for the motion to be that those committee members go to the new CNS and CRNA group if they so choose to. That would be a great benefit to those newly formed advisory committees. If APRNAC stays, those are members of the APRNAC, we would formulate 2 brand new advisory committees, the CNS and the CRNA advisory committee. We would put out a call to action, we would recruit, and they would have the ability, they could apply for that position in CNS or CRNA. It would not be automatic, and they would be considered with all of the other applicants on who would be appointed to that. There is a possibility that it would be considered that they come over, which would then leave those 3 vacancies in APRNAC additional to the 3 vacancies already there. So there would be 6 vacancies on the APRN committee, and that would leave them with 2 nurse practitioners and 2 nurse midwives, or 1 nurse midwife, sorry. So the current APRNAC, if those members move to CNS and CRNA, that's where they choose to move and those committees are created, there would only be 3 members left of the original APRNAC committee. And so then, in addition to advertising for additional members of the CNS and CRNA advisory committee, we would have to go out and advertise for 6 additional spots for the APRNAC committee. So continuing both of them would possibly lead to delays as we recruit new members because of the membership change. If we sunset, the board could make a motion that the APRN committee sunset after the formation of CNS and CRNA advisory committees. That way there is no gap. If that is something that our board wants to continue, instead of saying APRN sunsets today, and then we might have, 4 months or so before a CNS and CRNA committee is established. If the board wants to sunset the APRN committee after the establishment of, or on establishment of the CNS and CRNA committee, that is something that could be done too, as to not create any delays. Hopefully that answered your question.
It did. Thank you.
Lori, I have a question too. Is there, and from what you were saying about Bagley Keene, it may not be one, but is there a possibility if we have the 4 committees that there could be meetings on a periodic basis that would be joint meetings where they could address, because I do see a potential conflict between the APR and AC being totally different people than those who sit on the individual specialty committees. Would that be a Bagley Keene violation if we said whatever period that they would be joint meetings where they would talk about issues in common?
No, that would not be a Bagley Keene. And we are actually, an example is in spring, we are actually double noticing a nurse practitioner advisory committee and a nurse midwife advisory committee. Because of the recommendation that came out through AB 890 and SB 1237, they want those groups to opine on disciplinary processes around those advanced practice groups as they go into independent practice. And so we will be noticing a joint meeting in the beginning of this next year for both NP and NPAC and NMAC to come together to have a similar discussion on the disciplinary guidelines and work together to make recommendations as to not provide like a cleft or a division of those specialties when it comes to disciplinary guidelines that should be fairly similar for both of them. So that is absolutely something that the board can ask at any point. We could build into a charter if that's something that you guys want. But each one of these 4 committees, if CNS and CRNA are developed, we could offer on an annual basis to bring all 4 of them together as a multiple noticed meeting to have them come in and talk about all areas related to each one of the advanced practice. That could be something that we consider, that the board consider and put forward. But know that that doesn't have to wait for a publicly noticed meeting for that to occur, because each one of these chairs or vice chairs do come out and report in the nurse practice committee, the board committee here, like you're seeing today, and in the board meetings. And so we will have a joint discussion on all 4 of these committees if that is the vote on each one of our practice committees as well as our board committees, to have a discussion and consideration on how this affects all 4. And so that does not need to wait for that publicly noticed meeting if you put all 4 of them together. So just some clarification when you're thinking about planning.
Could we build that into the motion?
You can, yeah. I mean, and this is a motion to recommend to the board, just so you understand that. And so when you guys are recommending, this is coming from the practice committee to recommend this to the board, and then the board would have the ability November 14th or 15th, depending on when it comes up on the agenda, to ratify this or make any modifications to that motion at that point.
I would be interested to hear what some of the public members had to say about that idea. If we were able to keep the committees meeting jointly, would that, meet I understand the concern about issues that the different specialties have in common, wanting to be able to do that, but I also think being more aligned between who's on the committees and who's on the joint committee could be very helpful. So that will be an opportunity at the board meeting in November if we move this forward. Okay.
So this agenda item is specifically about the role and continuation of the APRN AC, and ultimately, whatever you decide will be a recommendation to the board for that. So in connection with the continuation of that's really what we're focused on, is continuation of APRN AC. In connection with that, you can talk about, recommending CNS and CRNA committees, and there will be an opportunity, like you said, when this is brought before the board, if you recommend action, for further public participation. One thing that I wanted to kind of highlight that Lori kind of touched on initially when she started talking about this was the scope of the APRN-AC, and I think Dolores, you kind of used the term, you asked whether it would muddy the waters, and I thought it would be useful to kind of circle back to that and remind you that when we created the Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee and the Nurse Midwifery Advisory Committees, at that time, the APRN-AC was, of course, focused on all 4 APRN groups. And when those 2 new committees were formed pursuant to statute, their scope was kind of carved out of the APRN-AC scope shortly after, so that APRN-AC was focused on CNS issues, CRNA issues, and issues that affected all 4 APRN groups. If you were to form a CNS committee and a CRNA committee as separate standing advisory committees, I would presume that the scope of the APRN-AC, were it to remain, would again kind of be whittled down to carve out the issues specific to CNSs and CRNAs. So what would really be left is issues that affect all 4 APRN groups. That's really all that would kind of be left in their purview, really, I would think. I kind of question, the public comments have been extremely valuable and well received about an interest in collaboration amongst the APRN groups and an interest in, unity and where it's, appropriate for them to be kind of acting in step. But I didn't really hear a lot of critique about or really anything addressing the notion that Lori put forward, that really this committee, per its explicit terms, is a place to discuss issues common to RNs generally or all APRN groups. And Mary, your suggestion is an additional opportunity for discussion of issues affecting all 4 groups and to collaborate and ensure unity and all that. But the question, I think, one big piece of it is how much is there that affects all 4 APRN groups that's what's really going to be left in the APRN-AC's purview to kind of, justify continued meetings and all of that. Since we shifted and implemented NPAC and NMAC and kind of whittled down what the APRN-AC was looking at, I know they did have some constructive stuff, but a lot of it was, for example, focused on the, like the issue that we talked about earlier about the certifying body that needed to be changed in statute. In the future, that's something that would be dealt with in one of the new focused committees and not kind of a collaborative issue that needs to be addressed. So, I think, there are arguments pro and con, but that was one thing I wanted to highlight just so that, again, it was already discussed, but so that you can kind of make sure that that's part of your analysis and assessment. And if you are considering creating 2 new committees, what does that kind of leave this committee with?
I had a question.
Go ahead, Vicki.
It seems to me that we're operating right now in sort of the unknown if we make this change, and that the sticking point is on collaborative issues that the APRN-AC thinks they would pick up. Would it be possible, if we go ahead with the motion that the chair put on the table, that we try to compile those kinds of issues that we maybe miss, that the public lets us know, particularly the Nursing Practice Committee, that this would have been an opportunity that was missed, to see if there actually is a need, or if it's just something we're afraid would get missed. Am I making sense?
You're making sense. And that can absolutely be something. If there's the letter that was mentioned in public comment that was submitted last year, we can pull that forward and be part of the board materials as well. There will be a chance, of course, for this to be discussed in public comment. Any of that information that they want to bring forward that would affect all 4 APRN groups cumulatively can be presented at that point as well, with the specification that would be necessary to be addressed in an advisory committee before coming to this practice committee. This practice committee that we are currently holding right now is the area where all 4 APRNs come together to have the conversation on how this affects all 4 of them. In addition, it can also be looked at how it affects pre-licensure and not basic, but RN practice that's not advanced practice. An example was 16 CCR 1410.5, that new regulation that we kind of talked about being edited and opined on with the NEWAC committee, where it addresses the out-of-state advanced practice person coming in, the public comment on the nurse anesthetist that said, we have nurse anesthetists that want to come to California, and they're having problem because of their pre-licensure material, which is the microbiology with lab and anatomy and physiology with lab. That's something that affects all advanced practice nurses. And that was managed in a different advisory committee, nurse advisory workforce, the NEWAC committee, education workforce. But it was initiated in nursing practice. Nursing Practice Committee identified this as a need. Nursing Practice Committee said, we need to make a motion on this and we need to get some language done because this is causing our endorsement applicants being able to come into California and get licensed here with ease. And so it came from this committee, the identification of something that affected all practice areas, including RNs coming in an endorsement, as well as the 4 advanced practice RNs. And then there was discussion after it moved through Nurse Practice Committee to the board and it was granted and moved on, within the Advanced Practice Committee community about whether or not that would have affected their practice. Well, that was perfect because then we were able to have those conversations around that. And this would be the forum to do that, the Nurse Practice Committee that looks at all nursing practice, including RN practice, as well as the advanced practice. So the what if that has been identified here as, hey, this, if we sunset the Advanced Practice Nursing Advisory Committee, this won't be able to happen, was already proven that it happened this year, that we've already addressed it, that it came from practice committee. We have proof that says it was not missed, and that the consideration was taken care of and identified in this committee and moved it forward with regulations, absent of the APRNAC, absent from any additional committees, because this is the place where that stuff comes from. So we can absolutely add that to any board materials if people submit that and have that, but I really want our committee members to understand that that what if that is being discussed happened already this year in practice committee, and it was dealt with beautifully. The identification occurred. The nurse practice committee moved it where they considered all aspects of nursing, including APRNs. And we have a regulatory package that it's on its way and moving because of the identification of the combined need.
Lori, can I make a suggestion? I think that I'm really sorry that I'm going to miss the November meeting, but it might be helpful if you were to have a slide part of your PowerPoint which include some of the concerns outlined in the letter with the information that you just gave us, to show that actually some of the concerns you hear, because it was clear for me reading the letter and hearing the comments today, these are people who care really deeply, are really committed, and they bring up some legitimate concerns that anytime we do change, there are unintended consequences that we cannot predict. But you're showing that past practices maybe will predict that some of the concerns will be met with adequate response by just the information you're going through today. So I think just validating that by including it would be helpful.
I will. When we receive the information, if we receive letters, we'll go through the comment section here in the meeting minutes, and I will do a question answer kind of response for that. And I'll have it at least part of the materials. If it's not on the PowerPoint, but it'll at least be part of the materials, and we'll see what we can do to get it added to the PowerPoint so that it is a visual on screen during the meeting.
Yeah, I just think it might help with some of the concerns that have been expressed. But anyways, great response. Thank you. Thank you to the members of the committee who really, you can tell how much they care. So,
yeah, they're a good group. Thank you. So if there are no further comments or discussion, we do have a motion and a second. We've gone out to public comment. Dolores, do you want to do a roll call vote?
I will. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Dr. Mary Fagan?
Mary Fagan, yes.
Vicki Granowitz?
Vicki Granowitz votes yes.
Jovita Dominguez?
Yes, yes.
Okay, the motion carries. And do we have time for this? We're going to break at 11:30 for lunch.
We will not have time for this. So we will do a planned break from 11:30 to 12:15 to accommodate some of the committee members and our board staff to have a lunch. And we will come back and we will adjourn at 12:15 for agenda item 7.8, information only on OPES.
Adjourn?
Sorry, convene at 12:15, did you say?
Yes, at 12:15 and not adjourn. I'm so sorry. Just taking a lunch.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. We will take roll call for the Nurse Practice Committee to establish quorum. Dolores Trujillo is present. Jovita Dominguez?
Jovita, present.
And Vicki Granowitz?
Granowitz, present.
Vicki, sorry. Thank you. I said Tricia. That's my bad. I still need more coffee. Thank you.
All right. And then Mary Fagan is not on. And Betty Woods. So we still have a quorum.
We do. And Mary should be joining us soon. And
That's fine.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay, so we go to item 7.8. This is information only. This is an update from the Department of Consumer Affairs Office of Professional Examination Services, OPES, regarding occupational analysis mandated under Business and Professions Code, Section 2337.105.
Thank you. So I will do the lead in and then hand it over. Board moderator, can you please elevate Tracy Montez? She is in the attendees, and I see that Heidi Linzer has already been elevated. So with the passing of AB 890, the board was given a directive to work with the Office of Professional Examination Services. And so I'll read that statutory guideline, which is 2837.105. It says the board shall request the department's Office of Professional Examination Services or an equivalent organization to perform an occupational analysis of nurse practitioner functions, nurse practitioner performing the function specified in subdivision C of section 2837.101 pursuant to the subdivision. It says that the board together with OPES shall assess the alignment of competencies tested in the National Nurse Practitioner Certification Examination required by subparagraph A of paragraph 1 of subdivision A of section 2837.103 with the occupational analysis performed according to paragraph 1. It also states that this occupational analysis shall be completed by January 1, 2023. And it says, if the assessment performed according to paragraph 2 identifies additional competencies necessary to perform the function specified in subdivision C of section 2837.103 pursuant to that subdivision, that are not sufficiently validated by the National Nurse Practitioner Board Certification Examination required by subparagraph A of paragraph 1 of subdivision A of section 2837.103, the board shall identify and develop a supplemental exam that properly validates identified competencies, and that examination process shall be regularly reviewed pursuant to section 139. So that is statutory language. I'll give it out in lay language. When AB 890 was passed, AB 890 created a pathway to independent practice for nurse practitioners, and that is by moving to 2837.103, which is commonly referred to as the 103 NP, that works without standardized procedures within a group setting, and is subdivision 2837.104 that allows for nurse practitioners to work without standardized procedures independently. And so with that, the ask was of the board to create a transition to practice. That transition to practice is now outlined in regulations and going through that process for approval. It has not been approved yet. Comment period does close on the 2nd. And part of that transition to practice is this evaluation performed by the Office of Professional Examination Services, OPES, that is coming in over 2 months early. Thank you for that. Because they were given in statute until January 1, 2023 to look at the competencies, the national nursing certifications, and make recommendations to the board on what their findings were. And so they did identify that an examination was not necessarily needed. So I know that the Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee, as well as the nurse practitioners that are probably anxiously waiting in public comment, are very happy to hear that. But I'd love to open this up and allow both Heidi Linzer and Tracy Montez to give a report out. And they are here for question and answers as well. So I will turn it over to them. Thank you.
Thank you. I will just briefly share that we have for the November meeting, the committee of the board. We will take you.
Tracy, can you speak up a little bit or get closer to the mic? I can barely hear you.
Sure, I'll lean forward into my microphone. We are going to be presenting November committee and board meetings. We have a rather extensive presentation that will take you through the process and detail out the results. And so really today we're here pretty much just for the update that the EO read We don't want to go into results details at this point because we feel that the presentation at the November meetings will be very helpful. I will share with you that OPS will be releasing the occupational analysis report, which is part of this entire project. That will be released today to the public. Other reports may or may not be released depending upon non-disclosure agreements that we have with the certifying agencies. But again, we will give a much more comprehensive presentation at the November meetings. And with that, I'll turn it over to Heidi to see if she has any additional comments.
Hi, this is Heidi Linser, Chief of OPES. And yes, just wanted to say we're really happy to have finished the work on the project and we had a very good working relationship with the BRN, and they were cooperative on every aspect that we needed them to be, and want to say thank you for that opportunity. And as Tracy said, the reports are ready. We're going to release them this afternoon, and we know the board might need to process them to get them up on the board's website, but that will be coming soon. And as Tracy said, we have a presentation ready for November 1st. And I believe we'll also make the presentation at the November 14th, 15th board meeting if the board desires that. And the conclusion was, I'll just reiterate what Loretta said, that we felt that the competency exams that exist measure the most important competencies needed for nurse practitioners practicing independently. We don't believe a supplemental exam is needed. And we did provide information to the examination providers of ways they can improve their examinations. And we also believe that they need to undergo periodic review, and that would be in compliance with BMP 139. And we'll talk more about that during the presentation. In addition, we have some recommendations for the BRN for the transition to practice requirements.
Thank you, Tracy. And Heidi. Is there any comments or questions from the committee members? Now, as I understand it, you will be presenting at the November board meeting a more comprehensive explanation and, okay, great. Seeing that there is no more comments.
I'll jump in real quick, Dolores, just so that committee members and ultimately board members on November 14th and 15th are completely aware of this process. So this was requested. We do have the recommendations. This will go to the NPAC committee on November 1st for a more robust discussion. We will get recommendations from NPAC that will then be included in the board materials. This discussion will then terminate in the board meeting November 14th and 15th, where more discussion will happen, more public comment will happen. The recommendations from NPAC will be included, and decisions around utilizing this information to update a subsequent regulatory package can be considered, as well as amending the current regulatory package or making a decision not to do anything at this moment and just receive those recommendations and look at them for future consideration possibly. So this is a big piece of the puzzle that we were waiting on to be completed, and we're looking forward to discussing this in NPAC and in the board in the next couple weeks, and moving forward towards implementation, aiming for January.
Thank you, Lori.
And I did see that Mary has joined. I don't know if you want a quick recap, Mary, or if you were able to hear any of this. We did just discuss agenda item 7.0. It was on the Office of Professional Examination. The memo is included in the materials. Tracy Montez and Heidi Linzer, who are both here in a panelist now as part of OPES, did a quick report out, nothing that elaborated on the information in your package. And they opened it up to board comment and question. There has not been any board comment or question yet. And then it is information only. So if you don't have any questions or comments, Mary, or want some additional information, we can go to public comment.
Yep, that's fine with me. I reviewed the material.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Mary. All right, we'll open it up for public comment.
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Carrie Clark would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Go ahead, Ms. Clark.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I just typed my question. But in case I missed it, sorry if it was answered already. I'm a family nurse practitioner. I've always practiced in orthopedics and aesthetics, and I've still practiced in both currently, and was hoping to have my own aesthetics practice once this new process went into effect in 2023. I think I've seen a couple things out there, but haven't gotten a definitive answer on whether that is acceptable come 2023.
Thank you for your comment. Dr. Cynthia Yovanov would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Go ahead, Dr. Yovanov.
Can you hear me? I'm sorry. I'm not sure if you guys can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Oh, perfect. Well, good afternoon. I'm glad everybody had their lunch. It's been a long day. I'm Cynthia Jovanov. I am the current president of the California Association for Nurse Practitioners. First, I want to applaud the OPES team for completing this in-depth analysis well before the deadline, and we do appreciate the amount of work that went into the process. We do support the conclusion that a supplemental examination is not necessary, and we believe that the education provided to the NPs clearly prepares us to practice independently. We are deeply concerned, however, by the recommendations from OPES that the board should require or consider additional supervised clinical experience and mentoring programs as part of the transition to practice requirement, but we urge the committee to reject that recommendation because it reveals a bias based on the inquiry of just physicians, and it appears it may be a bit beyond the scope of OPES with the intent of the bill. We don't believe this is supported by the vast amount of research and the nurse practitioner academic community. We believe that the language the board has proposed in its draft regulations already appropriately address the transition to practice. I want to thank you all for the ongoing partnership to implement AB 890. We do look forward to completing this process and executing the bill that our current and future NP workforce, healthcare systems, and communities have been patiently waiting for. We do look forward to the more in-depth presentation and discussion at the NPAC meeting November 1st. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Mary would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Go ahead, Mary.
Tahiri, nurse practitioner. I'm a member of SEIU 721 as well as CANP. Just want to clarify, if I may. First of all, thank you all so much, including the BRN Nurse Practitioner Committee, Loretta and your team, and the OPS for doing all of the work and trying to expedite the 8890 to actually be in effect so we can help better provide services to our communities that are underserved. My question is, OPS states that they solicited input from the physicians in the section called Transition to Practice Requirements. I wanted to find out, is this accurate? And was it only the physicians that were interviewed for this process or this section? Were any NP subject matter experts and NP faculty asked to provide data besides the physicians? Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your comment. Leslie Bloomquist would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Go ahead, Ms. Bloomquist.
Hi, this is Leslie Bloomquist. I'm the president of the California Association of Nurse Practitioners Kern Tulare chapter. And I will say that we have a common thought today. I would like very much to thank the OPS for the work they did in clarifying that nationally certified nurse practitioners do not require a supplemental exam for independent practice in California. I also would like to thank the BRN for all your work and guidance regarding the independent practice for nurse practitioners. But as an NP using an evidence-based system, I would like to have more clarity regarding the sources of evidence that OPS reviewed to guide their recommendations for transition to practice. Reading the report, as others have mentioned, it says they also solicited input from physicians. And I'm wondering, were other groups solicited also for information regarding the transition to practice, administrators, educators, etc.? So a common theme here, wondering about what other groups were information was solicited from. Thank you very much for all your work.
Thank you for your comment. Nancy Trago would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Nancy? Go ahead, Ms. Trago. Yes, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nancy Trigo. I'm a geriatric nurse practitioner. I completely agree with the prior comments from Cynthia Jovanoff and Mary from SEIU. I would like to thank the OPS as well for their deep dive analysis. But I'm wondering why the transition to practice was included in the OPES evaluation of the NP occupational analysis. Thank you. I just have that, would like to submit that question.
Thank you for your comment. Christy DeLemos would like to make a comment. Ms. DeLemos? Okay, we'll come back. Kathy Hughes would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Go ahead, Ms. Hughes.
and the executive director of SEIU Nurse Alliance of California. I do appreciate all of the work and do appreciate OPS's evaluation that no additional exams are needed. But I do have some concerns. We represent thousands of nurse practitioners across the state around the insufficiency of existing NP education and training, and whether core competencies can be measured, the clinical decision-making assessed through on-the-job supervised clinical experience and mentoring programs. My understanding is the physicians are the ones that do the supervision and the mentoring out in the field while nurse practitioners are practicing in order to become 103 or 104 nurses. So my concern is, are they not doing their jobs in adequately supervising and mentoring nurse practitioners? Because if they're not, then I could see why they have some concerns. If they are, then I don't understand why they have any concerns about evaluating whether nurse practitioners are competent in clinical decision making. It seems like that's putting their own work into question, because we know that our nurse practitioners do great work and provide excellent care. So we're just a little concerned about them putting out the question about whether or not there needs to be additional clinical experience or mentorships as part of the transition to practice, and whether that was even part of the scope that was being asked of OPIS. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Dr. Mitchell Erickson would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for allowing me to speak. But I want to, again, sort of reiterate my appreciation for the work of OPES in completing their analysis. And I want to reiterate as with earlier comments regarding the scope of OPS. And when you read the materials that were submitted, they were very specific. It says that they were contracted to conduct an occupational analysis in 8 specialties, perform a psychometric and security review of the 11 NP certification exams, and then compare those exams as outlined in comparison to California, and then evaluate the results and 11 linkage studies to make recommendations. That was the specific contract requested for OPS. So I agree with others that I'm not clear what their role is in determining or soliciting input about transition to practice within the purview of NPAC and its recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Eileen Kelleher would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Go ahead.
To echo my colleagues' concerns regarding the transition to practice suggestions by OPES, and hope that the board will consider ensuring that nurse practitioners and nurse practitioner subject matter experts have input in regards to this. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Christy DeLemos would like to make the comment. 1 second, please.
The concerns regarding just the scope of the evaluation, but also have one very specific question regarding the acute AGAC, adult gerontological acute care NP certification. It occurred to me that because I'm an NP with many years of experience, and some other of my colleagues will be in the same boat, that my exam has been retired. So the acute care nurse practitioner exam for national board certification is no longer available, and I would have to go back to school to sit for the AGAC exam. And I'm wondering, are you folding in the acute care boarded experienced nurse practitioners into the AGAC model, so that we can also apply for 103 independent licensure? Is that something the board has considered?
Thank you for your comment. Committee Chair Trujillo, there are no other public requests for comment. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. Thank you. Item 7.9, this concludes our committee meeting for nursing practice. We are adjourning nursing practice.